It was a quiet evening, the sun dipping low behind the hills, bathing the fields in golden light. Across the horizon, a farmer named Bill wiped the sweat from his brow. He had spent the day tending to his crops, nurturing them with care, as he had for decades. The rhythmic sound of the wind rustled through the cornstalks, whispering secrets of resilience and renewal. Yet in his heart, Bill felt an unsettling chill. A storm was brewing, not in the skies but in the shadows. As darkness settled in, a bevy of headlights pierced the tranquil gloom. A group of trespassers had arrived. They rolled onto his property in a raucous caravan, tires crunching defiantly over the gravel. Bill recognized that kind of vehicle, a truck filled with mischief, and perhaps something more sinister. In his gut, he felt that this was not just a simple case of kids wanting to have a night out. It felt personal. They had come to test his resolve. The laughter echoed around the yard, boisterous and mocking, but Bill did not flinch. He had always been a proud man, fiercely protective of his land. As the headlights flicked off and darkness enveloped them, the group poured out, clad in hoodies, their faces barely visible. They walked toward the barn, their intentions cloaked in shadows. One of them shouted, his voice dripping with derision. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, like the chill that crept into Bill's bones. Bill felt the urge to retreat, to pull back into the safety of his home, but he didn't. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the years of blood, sweat, and tears he had poured into his land. Each crop was a testament to his commitment, each furrow a story carved by his hands. He stepped out of the shadows, his silhouette framed by the warm glow of the porch light. "That's right, it's mine," he said, voice steady, unwavering. The group's voices faltered for a moment, surprise flickering across their faces. They had expected fear, not confrontation. Bill's steady gaze locked onto theirs, and in that moment he became something more, a guardian of his past, present, and future. The wind rustled again, carrying with it the scent of earth and ambition. Another voice sneered, stepping forward, masking trepidation with bravado. He was up for a challenge, but the bravado was a mask, and behind it lay a deeper fear of failure, fear of being trivial, fear of standing in the shadow of a man who knew his land better than they knew themselves. Bill stood resolute. He wasn't going to let these strangers dictate the narrative of his life. "I guard what's mine," he declared. A murmur of discontent swept through the group. They had come expecting a fight, expecting a man who would cower before their bravado, not a farmer who stood tall with the weight of generations on his shoulders. But the defiance in his stance was palpable. They bristled, uncertainty threading through their ranks. "Fine then," the initial instigator barked. The words hung heavy, a gauntlet thrown down, and in response the air thickened with tension. With a sudden, wild recklessness, one of the boys kicked a nearby dirt mound. The dust billowed into the air, swirling around them like chaos. It should have been an act of intimidation, spreading fear. Yet for Bill, it ignited something deep within, a resolve forged in the love of countless sunrises and moonlit nights spent with the soil beneath his fingernails. He scoffed, a flicker of a smile crossing his face. It was a dangerous gamble, mocking them, but he could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They were just kids playing dress-up in a world they did not know. Suddenly, the bravado broke. One of the group stepped back, shrugging his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of his own doubt. "Let's just leave him, man," he said quietly, looking less sure than when they arrived. Another voice added, trailing off as Bill's presence filled the space. He could sense the internal battle raging, a clash between reckless confidence and the simple truth that this was a man who had something worth standing for. For Bill, every moment was a reminder of his own father standing tall against the odds, chasing away whoever threatened their way of life. He said, stepping forward, voice steady, cutting through the tension like a hot knife through butter, "You want to scare someone, scare the weeds in my field." There it was again, the surprise flashing in their eyes. Children playing at bravado suddenly faced a man who had cultivated more than just crops. He had cultivated a spirit of resilience that wouldn't back down for anyone or anything. The leader spat, frustration crackling around him. Yes, Bill felt the weight of his words. They weren't just a rebuke, they were an invitation to step back and consider their choices. In that moment, something shifted. The energy pulsated in the air. One by one, he watched their bravado waver. Maybe they had come hoping for a quick thrill, but they found something entirely different. A man who had fought battles, who understood his land, who wouldn't falter. Silence enveloped the group, heavy and unyielding. Bill could feel their breaths in the air, shallow and uncertain. As a farmer, he was more than in tune with the land. He understood people. With every row he tilled, he learned about patience, about nurturing not just crops but relationships. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, a calm wash over the tension. "You're looking for a fight, but there are better things to fight for out there." They shifted, wariness creeping back into their motions. The leader, teetering on the edge, had a moment of uncertainty, revealing the vulnerability behind the guise of tough bravado. Bill offered no aggression, just stillness, and it sent a ripple of confusion through the group like a current straining against the shore. The leader paused, mind racing. A decision was brewing within, perhaps a question of identity. Who were they really? This wasn't a fight over land, it was a reckoning with their own lives. The spark of realization flickered in the depths of their eyes. One by one the boys began to shift, some glancing at each other, caught in the moment. Then came the silence, the precious, golden silence of revelation. Finally, the leader broke it, voice quiet, almost defeated. And like that, billowing chaos gave way to retreat. They retreated, shadows melding back into the night, leaving behind the echoes of what might have been a lesson about courage and resolve, about standing firm in one's identity, and knowing the true fight that matters. Bill watched as they drove away, the headlights dwindling into the distance, the stillness of the night wrapping around him again like a comforting blanket. He felt a swell of pride ignite in his heart, not just for defending his land but for reminding himself the truth of who he was. With the stars twinkling high above, Bill returned to his crops, to the twinkling rhythm of the earth beneath him. It was a tranquil victory, a quiet testament to strength found not in aggression but in the resolution to stay true, with feet planted firmly in the soil of hard-earned resilience. This was his life, his land, and he was stronger than the roar of those who sought to intimidate him. Under the vast sky, he carried forward, knowing that peace wasn't just about the absence of confrontation, but about standing tall even when darkness threatened to overtake the day. And as the moon cast its silver glow upon the fields, Bill understood one crucial truth. It wasn't the battle that defined him, but the unwavering spirit that refused to back down. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over a sprawling expanse of golden fields. It was harvest season, that magical time of year when crops yielded their bounty, and a tired but satisfied farmer named Joe wiped the sweat from his brow, looking out over the results of his labor. Corn stood tall, waving gently in the breeze, much like the pride swelling within him. But as Joe gazed upon his land, that pride was suddenly pierced by the sound of laughter, loud, raucous, and far too close for comfort. With a furrowed brow, Joe turned toward the noise, his instincts kicking in. 3 figures emerged from the tree line, their silhouettes bold against the setting sun. They weren't just wandering off the road, they were clearly trespassing. Joe's stomach sank as he recognized the familiar outline of a truck parked on the edge of his property, its tires kicking up dust like a taunt. One of them shouted, his voice brimming with cocky arrogance. "Hope you're not too attached to these fields." Joe stood his ground, tension coiling in his chest. He had dealt with troublemakers before, but this felt different. This wasn't just kids playing a prank, this was a threat. The trespassers were high school boys, boys he recognized from the local football team. Their leader, a tall one with a smug grin, stepped closer, eyes glinting with mischief. "Nice crops you got here. Would be a shame if something happened to them," he jeered. The others chuckled, their laughter cruel, echoing through the open air. But Joe didn't flinch. He had fought for this land to make it fruitful against droughts and floods, against all odds. "You're trespassing," he finally said, his voice steady, belying the storm brewing inside. The leader took a step forward, puffing up his chest, trying to instill fear. "Come on, what are you going to do? Call the cops?" But Joe had learned something important over the years. Fear was only powerful if you let it take hold. He took a deep breath, the scent of tilled earth grounding him. "I'm not afraid of you," he replied, his tone calm but resolute. "You think you can scare me?" The laughter faded, and a flicker of uncertainty danced in the leader's eyes. Joe stood tall, unyielding, his hands calloused but steady at his sides. Years of hard work had built not just strength in his muscles but also unwavering resolve in his spirit. One of the others yelled, emboldened by the leader's bravado. With that, they began tossing stones, small at first but soon escalating to more dangerous projectiles aimed at Joe's crops. The first hit sent a jolt through Joe, but it was not fear he felt, rather a surge of determination. He shouted, voice cracking like a whip in the air, "You're ruining what I've worked for." But their laughter grew stronger, fueled by the chaos they had created. They continued throwing stones until Joe saw red. In that moment, something inside him shifted. He no longer saw them as just boys. He saw them as symbols of a world that didn't respect hard work or the sanctity of land. He felt a sudden rush of commitment to protect what was his. He bellowed, his booming voice finally halting their reckless abandon. Whispering winds carried his words, strong enough to fill the silence that fell between them. The leader sneered, his bravado cracking like a fragile eggshell. "You really think you can scare us away? Maybe, but I'm also a man who spent years nurturing this land. I know every inch of it, every crop that rises and every weed that falls." Joe stepped forward, his heart pounding not out of fear but pure determination. The bravado in the boy's eyes flickered, replaced by a dawning realization that perhaps the old man before them was not simply an easy target. One of the boys hesitated, looking over at his friends. "We shouldn't be here," he murmured, the bravado washing away in the face of Joe's towering authority. The leader barked, but even he couldn't mask the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I don't have to take you. The land will take care of the rest." Joe's voice softened as he looked directly at the leader, breaking through the wall he'd built. "You seem like good kids. You have your futures ahead." The air hung heavy with tension, the laughter now silenced, the weight of Joe's words settling around them like a mist. It wasn't just a confrontation, it was a test, a moment of reckoning. They were at a crossroads, and the decisions they made here tonight would shape who they would become. The leader's demeanor shifted. He glanced back at his friends, the bravado unraveling. There was a flicker of regret, quickly masked by irritation. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, unable to restore the bravado he once held. "We don't have to be enemies." Joe reached out, voice steady but filled with warmth. "You want to throw rocks? How about you help me tend the land instead?" The thought hung in the air like a fragile truce. A moment of hesitation flashed across the face of the leader, wrestling with the idea of redemption against the allure of maintaining their rebellious edge. Joe could see the wheels turning, the light of choice flickering in their eyes. "Yeah, let's just leave," the hesitant boy finally spoke up. The words felt heavy but honest, and they rang out like a bell breaking the lingering silence. "Come on," one of the others echoed, casting aside the facade. The leader scowled, trying to muster the remnants of bravado, but it came out weak. "This isn't over," he warned, though the threat felt hollow. Joe watched them as they turned to walk away, their heads hung low, driving the point home like the impact of a fading storm. The dust settled behind them, shimmering in the twilight just like the hope that lingered for the boys, maybe for a change. As they disappeared beyond the trees, Joe felt the weight of victory, but it wasn't a victory over them. It was a victory over fear. He had defended his land and stood firm in his beliefs. With a sigh, he turned back to his fields, the moon now rising high above a soft guardian illuminating the crops he had tended with love and respect. The peace of the evening settled around him, and he embraced it, the warmth of the moment wrapping around him like family. In his heart, he understood that not every battle needed to be fought with anger or retaliation. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon was conviction and the ability to stand tall against the noise that sought to shake you. And as he walked among the rows of corn, he couldn't help but smile. The landscape was more than just soil and plants. It was a canvas painted with dreams, sweat, and dedication. That night Joe slept soundly, knowing he had not only stood his ground, but perhaps even opened a door toward understanding. As dawn broke the next morning, golden light spilled across the fields, illuminating the hard work and love embedded in the earth beneath him. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, grateful for the land that had been his life, for the stories it held, and for the resilience it had gifted him. Every inch of that soil whispered tales of struggle, triumph, and a simple truth. A man who stood up for what he believed was stronger than any force that sought to tear him down. And as the sun rose, so did Joe's spirit, ready to face whatever came next because deep down, he knew that he had not just defended his land. He had forged a path for something much greater. The truth that strength lies not just in the fight but in the unwavering commitment to what we hold dear. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a fiery glow over the rolling fields of corn. The rich scent of earth and the hum of crickets filled the evening air, promising a tranquil end to a long day. But peace can be deceptive. On the edge of that vast expanse of green, farmer Hank Thompson was finishing up his chores. With each movement, he felt more connected to the land that had been in his family for generations. Just as he wiped the sweat from his brow, a low rumble interrupted the serenity. A truck bounced down the dirt road, tires kicking up clouds of dust in its wake. Hank squinted as he tried to decipher the scene unfolding before him. The unmistakable sound of laughter filled the air, sharp and unwelcome. 3 figures climbed out, silhouetted against the setting sun. They looked too young for the arrogance they exuded. He stood there for a moment, disbelief flooding his senses. Were they really here? Trespassing just like that, they swaggered across his property as if they owned it. And in that instant, Hank felt something shift. This land meant everything to him. It was his life, his family's legacy. Anger simmered just below the surface, but he couldn't afford to let it boil over. He needed to think clearly. One of the boys, a tall kid wearing a baseball cap turned backward, grinned and shouted, "What's the matter, farmer? You planning to call the cops?" Hank took a breath, steadying himself. He had faced plenty of challenges in his life, the weather, the markets, but this. Why was it always a fight against disrespect? "You boys don't belong here," he said, his voice calm and measured but firm. Another boy, slightly shorter with a buzz cut, stepped forward. "Come on, this place is boring. We thought we'd have a little fun." It was a challenge they were throwing down, a gauntlet basking in confidence born from ignorance and youth. Hank felt a rush of emotions, fear, anger, but predominantly a fierce protectiveness for what was rightfully his. He took a moment, surveying their faces. Underneath their bravado, Hank could sense the uncertainty. "I've worked this land for years," he stated, voice unwavering. "I've fought storms, droughts, and hard times." The wind blew behind him as if lending force to his words. The leader chuckled, trying to maintain his bravado. "Regret? You're all talk, old man. We could turn these fields into a party zone right now." Hank felt the blood rush through his veins, boiling like the hot summer sun overhead. There was something deeper here, a reality that these boys didn't fully understand. He replied, stepping closer, narrowing the gap between them. "This isn't a playground. You're meddling with something you don't understand. I know every inch of this land." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The boys exchanged glances, their bravado wavering as the weight of Hank's words sunk in. Not all anger needs to erupt in violence. Sometimes it rings with the resonance of a truth that cuts through the haze of foolishness. Just then, one of the boys tossed a small rock into the field, leaving a small dent in the soft earth. He asked, casting a questioning look at the others for support, "What do you think will happen? You'll call the police?" Hank exhaled slowly, steeling himself. "You might think it's just stone throwing, but you're missing the point. Each rock you throw breaks something." It was a risk, that question hanging in the air like a storm cloud, but it also forced them to face reality. This wasn't a game. The boys shifted slightly, mulling over his words. "You know," Hank continued, his tone softening, "every time you throw something, it's not just the dirt you hit." Suddenly, the bravado seemed to drain from them like water through a sieve. Maybe they were realizing how trivial their antics truly were. The leader looked back at his friends, searching for an anchor in the suddenly unclear situation. He muttered, almost defensively. The shortest kid shrugged. "I don't know, man." Hank saw the doubt rising in their eyes one by one. And then, unexpected, came a sound. One of the boys chuckled, breaking the tension, yet now tinged with a hint of understanding. "Okay, I get it. Maybe we stepped out of line." That's when Hank decided to seize the opportunity. "Then help me," he suggested. The words came flowing out of him like the water of a new spring. "I could use some hands around here. I have a fence that needs mending and those crops won't harvest themselves. You want to have fun. Surprise flickered across their faces, each taking a step backward out of instinct, but that could just be the fear of hearing the suggestion. They hadn't expected a farmer to actually invite them to help. The idea cascaded across the surface tension like ripples in still water. The leader asked, confusion etching lines on his brow. "You want us to?" "Yes," Hank replied, his voice lowering, warmth seeping into his words. "You might find it more rewarding than you think." The tension in the air shifted dramatically, and Hank could almost see the walls they had built around themselves begin to crumble. Perhaps they craved something deeper than mere rebellion, a purpose, a connection. The leader hesitated, and Hank could see that the boy remembered something deeper, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes now. Hank chuckled, amusement threading through his voice. A sense of accomplishment, a good story you can tell your friends. Slowly, almost tentatively, the boys exchanged glances. They weighed their options, lingering on the edge of something new, an opportunity they hadn't expected. "All right," the leader finally said, crossing his arms, a renewed determination in his posture. "Let's give it a shot." It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Hank felt a flood of relief wash over him. They were willing to take a risk, to try something different. The group followed Hank to the barn, an old wooden structure that had stood against the winds of time. As they walked, he shared stories of how his family had built the farm from the ground up, the struggle of keeping it alive through hard winters and dry summers. Each step became a journey, weaving together their lives in surprising ways. He asked, showing them the tools in the barn. To his amusement, the kids admitted they had never really thought much about it. "Well, then it's about time you found out," Hank encouraged, handing them tools one by one. As the day wore on, hands that had once been raised in defiance now found their rhythm in hard work. They repaired fences, tilled soil, and eventually began the task of harvesting. Laughter replaced the menacing jeers that once filled the air, their camaraderie seemingly forged through shared labor. Hank watched, a smile creeping onto his face. They looked like different boys now, transformed by the simplicity of farm life, the sweat on their brows mixing with laughter and newfound respect. They discovered that the dirt smudged on their hands was more than just a mark. It was evidence of the effort they had put in, and it held a kind of silent pride. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the land, Hank pulled out a soft cooler filled with snacks he had prepared for them. "You've earned a break," he said, the warmth in his voice genuine. They sat around, sharing stories, the initial thread of earlier long forgotten. Hank learned their names and their dreams. They spoke of football, of college aspirations, and the struggles of being young men in a world that didn't quite make sense. He, in turn, shared tales of resilience, of the lessons that life on a farm had taught him, illustrating that every challenge faced was a stepping stone toward something more significant. By the end of the day, as the stars began to twinkle above, something remarkable had happened. The boys had transformed. They were no longer trespassers but allies, having forged a bond through sweat and shared laughter. They still might have had that youthful edge, but they now carried something deeper, in appreciation for hard work, for perseverance, and for the land that feeds them. As they prepared to leave, the leader approached Hank, an earnest look in his eyes. "I'm sorry for how we acted earlier," he said sincerely. Hank nodded, understanding the tides of youth. "Just remember, all it takes is a moment to change a perspective." With that, they shook hands, a bond sealed in the dirt and hard labor. As they drove away, Hank felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. He hadn't just defended his land. He had transformed a conflict into an opportunity for growth and understanding. In the following weeks, the boys returned, eager to work, and Hank welcomed them with open arms. Together, they tilled the soil, harvested crops, and forged new memories. In the community, they became advocates for the local farm, speaking to their peers about the importance of respecting the land and those who care for it. Hank watched the boys grow through this labor, recognizing that sometimes the best way to confront intimidation is not with anger, but with the distilled energy of hard work and understanding. The land had shown them all something vital, that every seed planted carries the promise of a future, one worth tending to, one that demands respect. And so the fields flourished, much like the newfound connections between Hank and those young men. their lives intertwined, each one shaped by the soil, the sun, and the lessons learned under the endless sky. The sun began its slow descent, spilling hues of orange and pink across the horizon. The fields lay still, interrupted only by the soft rustle of corn swaying in the evening breeze. In the heart of this pastoral scene stood Tom, a weathered farmer with hands that told stories of toil and triumph. Decades of labor marked his skin, the calluses, the scars, each one a badge of honor earned from countless seasons spent cultivating the soil. But that evening, something felt off. In the distance, he spotted a truck kicking up dust as it careened down the dirt road toward his property. The tires crunched against the gravel and Tom's heart sank. He had seen that vehicle before, filled with a group of locals with too much time on their hands and not enough respect for boundaries. Instinct kicked in. He tightened his grip on the pitchfork he was holding, the weight of it a comfort, a reminder of his resolve. As the truck parked, the laughter erupted, a mix of bravado and contempt that echoed through the quiet fields. 3 young men spilled out, their silhouettes casting long shadows against the setting sun. Tom recognized them immediately, teenagers from the nearby town, boys whose idea of fun often involved mischief at the expense of others. It didn't take long for their intentions to become clear. They ambled toward the edge of his property like a pack of wolves seeking prey. One of them shouted, a cocky smirk plastered across his face. The words dripped with mockery, and it set Tom's teeth on edge. "Get off my land," Tom replied, his voice steady but firm, cutting through the air like a sharp knife. He watched as their laughter faltered for a moment, surprise flickering across their faces. This wasn't the scared old man they expected. Another boy chimed in, stepping closer, puffing out his chest. "Don't you want to have a little fun?" Dread twisted in Tom's stomach, but he refused to back down. Years of hard work had built more than just his crops. They had built a spirit forged through grit and determination. "I said get off," he repeated, his voice rising just a notch, a storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. The leader of the group stepped forward, emboldened, but the brief flicker of fear in his eyes didn't go unnoticed by Tom. "What are you gonna do about it? Call the sheriff?" Tom took a breath, steadying himself. He was fully aware of the laws. Yes, he could call the police, but he knew that this was about more than just authority. It was about respect. "This land is my life," he said, gesturing to the crops that swayed gently around him. "I've spent years planting, nurturing, and protecting it." A wave of uncertainty washed over the group. The leader hesitated, the bravado flickering like a candle in the wind as he considered Tom's words. He retorted, struggling to regain control of the situation. But the cocky facade was crumbling. Tom replied, stepping a little closer, "I'm a man who works hard, a man who knows the value of what grows from this ground and the importance of those fields." There was a shift in the air, a tangible tension crackling like electricity, and Tom seized the moment. "You think this is just a game? Every rock you throw, every laugh at my expense only shows your weakness." As he spoke, he felt the years of struggle, the sweat that had soaked through his shirt during floods and droughts alike. The boys might not understand it now, but they were witnesses to something larger, a legacy that refused to yield. One of the boys shouted, trying to mask his growing unease with mockery. "Who cares about your stupid crops?" Of course, it was a ploy, a mask to conceal the uncertainty that had begun to bubble beneath the surface. But Tom saw it all too clearly, and he chose not to let the fear seep into his own resolve. He countered, "Not standing up for what you believe in." There was a pause, a collective weighing of their bravado against the conviction in Tom's voice. The leader looked back at the other boys, searching for support that didn't come. It was a steep realization. This wasn't just a farmer. It was a man standing unyielding against the waves of intimidation. Then came a moment that would turn the tide. The leader of the boys, fueled by a mix of reckless bravado and uncertainty, picked up a small rock and aimed it at Tom. "You know what?" In that split second, Tom felt a surge of adrenaline. "Go ahead, throw it." He held the boy's gaze, unwavering, grounded, and at that moment everything shifted. The boy's arm faltered, the rock slipping from his fingertips and thudding to the ground. The air hung thick with tension, and the faint sound of wind moving through the fields was almost deafening. With a sudden drop of his shoulders, the leader stepped back, embarrassment flooding his face. Tom's voice boomed, rich with authority, not out of anger but a powerful intention to protect what was rightfully his. For a moment, it felt like time itself stood still. Boys exchanged glances, searching for a hint of reassurance in one another, but all they found was uncertainty. Tom watched as they shuffled away, retreating toward the truck, laughter replaced by grumbles of confusion and shame. The transformation was palpable. The fear they had once thrown around had evaporated, leaving behind shreds of humility. As the truck pulled away, Tom let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The pressure released, leaving him standing firm in the embrace of his land. Over the next few days, whispers traveled through the local community. Tom's standoff with the trespassers became a tale shared among neighbors. Some praised his courage, while others questioned the wisdom of it all. Yet Tom felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had stood his ground and, more importantly, he had stood up for the very essence of his life. Days turned into weeks, and the world continued to spin on its axis. Life on the farm resumed its natural rhythm, but something had shifted. The trespassers had retreated, but the imprint of that encounter lingered in the air. One afternoon, while tending to the fields, a flicker of movement caught Tom's eye. He glanced up to see the boys, hesitating just outside his property line, their expressions transformed. They shuffled nervously, but this time there was no laughter, no bravado, just a tentative curiosity. Heart pounding slightly, Tom wiped his hands on his overalls and approached them. He asked bluntly but without hostility. "We were wondering if you needed help," the leader said, his voice quieter now, more earnest. The words hung in the air, a fragile olive branch, and Tom scrutinized them, the weight of their intentions hanging like the setting sun behind them. He could see it was different this time, the recognition of some deeper lesson learned from that first encounter. Tom repeated slowly, allowing the truth of it to settle. "Because we messed up," the leader confessed, pushing his baseball cap back. "What you said that day, it got to us. We didn't know the hard work that goes into farming." Tom raised an eyebrow, but inside he felt a spark of something hope. "All right," he said cautiously, "but if you're here to help, you better take it seriously." The boys nodded vigorously, the glimmers of something like respect coursing between them. They followed Tom into the fields, and as he handed them tools, something beautiful began to unfold. Over the next few weeks, laughter intertwined with hard work. They learned about planting, about the importance of every seed sown in soil. They learned what it meant to sweat under the sun, to appreciate the honest labor of life. Every day was a new lesson, not just in farming but in humility and respect. Interestingly, Tom found they had stories too. They were just boys struggling with their own challenges, searching for recognition, for belonging. And in a way, the farm became a bridge that connected their worlds. As autumn rolled in, the harvest was bountiful. The boys worked alongside Tom, their hands eventually stained with dirt and sweat, wearing smiles that spoke of hard-earned pride. On the day of the harvest celebration, Tom gathered them under the old oak tree on his property. "You fellas did good work this season," he said, pride swelling in his chest. They sat together, breaking bread, laughter echoing through the fields that had once known only tension. The boys shared tales of their lives, and Tom opened up about his experiences, weaving a tapestry of understanding and camaraderie formed by a shared respect for the land and each other. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with colors of warmth, Tom raised his glass, a simple gesture of acknowledgement for what had blossomed that season. The boys cheered, their voices full of life, their hearts finally aligned with the rhythm of the land. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Tom felt a deep, profound connection not just to his land, but to those boys who had come to understand the value of dedication, the significance of respect, and the beautiful potential that lay within each of them. Through this unexpected journey, they learned that sometimes the fiercest battles become the best teachable moments. For every trespasser turned ally, for every rock thrown in anger that became food for the soul, and for every moment of intimidation that transformed into understanding, there is a story worth telling, one that echoes in the whispers of the wind across golden fields. The sun dipped low above the horizon, casting an orange glow across the rolling fields of corn. The evening air was warm, filled with the sweet scent of growing things. Farmer Sam Thompson, a man in his late 50s with a face weathered from years of hard labor, wiped his brow and surveyed his land. It had been a long day of planting seeds, and his entire body ached, yet a sense of satisfaction filled him. This land was his life. It echoed with the memories of generations before him, each inch imbued with history, love, and sweat. But the peaceful scene shattered like glass when the roar of a truck engine pierced the evening calm. Sam squinted against the blinding sun and spotted a truck bouncing down the dirt road, dust swirling like a fog behind it. His heart sank. He had seen that truck before. A group of young men from the nearby town, known for their reckless antics, were barreling onto his land again. As the truck skidded to a stop, laughter erupted from the cab, the kind of laughter that sent warning bells ringing in Sam's mind. 3 teenagers jumped out, swaggering toward him with all the confidence of youth, their shadows stretching long and ominous across the field. Each of them was brimming with bravado, completely unaware of the storm they were about to stir. Shouted the tallest boy, a grin plastered across his face. "You're your own boss around here." They laughed again, and it cut through the evening air like a knife. "Get off my property," Sam replied, voice calm but firm, grounding himself in years of hard work and determination. "Oh, come on, don't be such a grouch," another boy yelled, stepping forward. "What are you going to do, call the cops?" Every fiber in Sam's being screamed to stand his ground. This land was not just dirt and crop, it was his legacy, his heart. "This isn't a game," he shot back. The leader of the group, a lanky kid with an air of false bravado, stepped closer. What's the worst that could happen? He threw a stone into the air, a clear act of challenge, the amusement shining in his eyes. That surge of adrenaline hit Sam like a tidal wave. As the stone hit the ground, a fire ignited within him. "You think it's funny?" His voice, once steady, now quaked with emotional power. "Oh, look at the farmer getting mad. What's he going to do, plant another crop?" The laughter rang wildly, mingling with the edge of insanity, an echo of youthful invincibility. But Sam held the gaze of the boy who had thrown the stone, grounding himself. "You don't get it. Every seed I plant, every inch of land I work represents hours of my life. This is not just my job, this is my home." The bravado began to crack. Unease slipped into the boys' laughter like a thief in the night. They exchanged glances, the bravado shrinking with every second that passed. The leader pressed, but it wasn't a question anymore. It was a desperate plea for validation amidst doubt. "If you think throwing a few rocks will intimidate me, you're mistaken," Sam shot back. "I've weathered storms that could wash away your entire town, fought through droughts that could break a man." Suddenly, the boys fell silent, realizing they were tangled in a net they had spun themselves. Sam stepped forward, every muscle in his being ready to defend what was his. "Take a look around you," he said, gesturing to the fields that stretched endlessly before them. "This land didn't just come to life overnight. It needs respect, commitment, and care. You want to mess with it?" The leader's bravado wavered, hesitation flickering across his face. He mumbled, the bravado slipping with every word. "You didn't think at all," Sam replied, voice low and firm, a silent authority radiating from him. "But here's a lesson for you. True strength is not in belittling someone else. It's about upholding what you believe in. You want to be strong." For a breathless moment, the air crackled, charged with mounting tension. The boys stood frozen, several expressions morphing into something closer to reflection, confusion washing over their faces like a tide pulling back from the shore. "Let's go," the leader finally muttered, perhaps aware that the fight was gone from him. They shuffled back toward the truck, glances still cast back at Sam, a touch of newfound respect lingering in the air. As they climbed into the cab, Sam's heart pounded in his chest. He was grateful it hadn't come to blows, yet there had been a shift, not just within the kids but also within him. He realized that standing firm wasn't just about protecting his land. It was about modeling integrity, showing that respect matters. The truck roared to life and pulled away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Sam stood tall, the sun now sinking behind the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of purple and indigo. He felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had stood his ground and in doing so had perhaps planted a seed of understanding in those boys' minds. Days passed, and the encounter lingered in Sam's thoughts. He returned to his routine, caring for the land and gathering crops, but he wondered if there was more he could do to foster respect for the farm and the connection to the people around him. He had witnessed firsthand that intimidation often springs from ignorance, and he wanted to change that. One afternoon, as he pruned some of the vines near the edge of his property, he saw a familiar vehicle approaching. The same truck that had once rattled his peace rolled up and his heart sank for a split second. But when the door swung open, he saw the boys step out, their demeanor entirely different. "Hey, the leader asked, his voice soft and genuine this time without a hint of mockery. Sam raised an eyebrow but nodded cautiously. The boys shuffled awkwardly, clearly out of their element. "We wanted to say we're sorry," the leader continued, his confidence washed away. "We didn't realize what we were doing was so disrespectful." "Seems you didn't think much at all," Sam replied, his tone more measured this time. "But you're here now." "Yeah," one of the other boys chimed in. "We can help, we could do some work like planting or we could just listen," the leader interjected. "We want to understand more about what you do. You said respect was important." The sincerity was surprising and it struck a chord deep inside Sam. "All right," he said finally, the corners of his mouth curving into a faint smile. The boys nodded, eager to prove themselves. They promised before piling back into the truck, their faces animated with a sense of purpose. The next morning Sam was up before the sun, ready to greet the day. As the first rays of light broke through the horizon, the truck pulled in and the boys hopped out, bright-eyed and full of energy. "All right," Sam said, pointing toward the field. "Today we're planting." Hands found tools, irritation from the past dissipating, and in its place came the palpable energy of collaboration. With each seed they planted, they fostered resilience, sprouting not just crops but a bond between them, one built on mutual respect and understanding. One of the boys asked, eyes filled with honest curiosity. Sam smiled, sharing stories of how corn had fed families for generations, how hard times had shaped the land's spirit, and how every season brought its challenges. Each boy listened intently, absorbing every word, recognizing the weight of responsibility that had once felt so trivial. As the days blended into weeks, they worked side by side, digging, planting, and learning, their laughter echoing through the fields, now a reminder of the bond forged in those moments. They heard about the frost that could ruin a crop overnight and the storms that swept through, and they stood together in solidarity, united by purpose. One evening, as they gathered under the old oak tree to take a break, the connection deepened further. "You know, we used to think it was boring out here," the leader said, staring out across the fields. "But now I get it. And it's rewarding," Sam added. By the end of the season, the boys were starting to change, not just in their approach to farming, but in their lives beyond it. They began to think differently, treating their peers and families with more respect, valuing hard work the way they now valued their time in the fields. Earlier in the fall, they'd arrived as trespassers, but now they were allies. As harvest approached, Sam called them together. "Tomorrow, we're bringing in the bounty." The boys nodded, their faces lighting up with excitement. They had become more than just helpers. They were part of something larger, a legacy that moved through the soil, through the crops, and into the hearts of those who nurtured them. As they began to harvest the corn, laughter and voices filled the air again, but this time it was a chorus of celebration. With every ear they picked, the feeling of accomplishment surged within them. They shared stories, and Sam even let them take turns using the old tractor, a rite of passage that filled each of them with pride. When the celebration began, under a blanket of stars, the boys shared a feast with Sam, a testament to what they had accomplished together. Sipping sweet cider, he raised his glass. They cheered in unison, a sense of belonging enveloping them like the cool autumn air. And so, surrounded by the heart of the land that had once faced intimidation and disrespect, they had transformed that energy into respect, learning, and friendship. The boys who had once sought to tear down had now grown roots in the very soil they had disrespected. In the reflections of those fields, Sam recognized a fundamental truth. Sometimes, the The fiercest warriors are those who stand firm not just to defend but to teach, to show the beauty that lies within the land and the people who nurture it. Day by day, seeds of understanding grew, blooming into a harvest they would all cherish, an everlasting bond, discovered in the midst of challenges faced, respect earned, and the never-ending journey of finding common ground. The farmlands whispered tales of resilience and triumph, resonating far beyond their storied soil, a testament to the power of standing firm in one's beliefs, ensuring that kindness and respect would always prevail. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple as Farmer Joe climbed down from his tractor, muscles aching from a long day in the fields. Sweat dripped from his brow, but there was a sense of satisfaction in the air. This was his land, his life's work, nurtured through countless seasons of hard labor. Cornstalks stood tall around him, whispering in the gentle evening breeze. But that tranquility was about to shatter. A cloud of dust billowed in the distance as headlights bounced toward him along the dirt road. Joe squinted, a pit forming in his stomach. He recognized the vehicle, a beat-up truck that belonged to those local kids known for their reckless antics. The moment the truck pulled up and the doors swung open, laughter erupted, echoing through the quiet fields like a thunderclap. "Hey, old man," one of them shouted, a sneer etched across his face. The others laughed as if rehearsed. Joe straightened, determination coursing through his veins. He had seen this before, and he wasn't going to let it slide. "You boys need to leave." "This is private property," he replied, his voice steady yet firm. But the leader of the group, a tall kid with an arrogance that belied his age, stepped closer. "Private property? What are you gonna do? Call the cops?" Each word dripped with disdain, a challenge hanging thick in the air. As they advanced, Joe felt a mix of dread and defiance swirling inside him. This was not just a confrontation, it was an assault on everything he held dear. Each inch of this land had a story, and he would defend it as fiercely as he would protect his family. "Let me tell you something," Joe said, voice rising with intensity. "I've fought storms and droughts. I've poured my sweat and tears into every furrow of this soil. You think you can come here and destroy what I've built?" For a heartbeat, the laughter faded. The bravado in their eyes flickered, replaced by the uncertainty of youths confronting a man of conviction. The leader taunted, trying to mask that flicker with bravado. Joe took a step forward, the weight of generations behind him. "I'm going to stand my ground." The leader spat, emphasizing his bravado with a stiff stance. "No," Joe replied, locking eyes with the young man. "I don't want to scare you. I want you to understand that respect isn't given, it's earned." A tremor of doubt danced across the boys' faces as they exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping in where defiance once stood. Joe could sense it, a crack forming in their facade, realizing they had underestimated the resolve of a man who had spent his life laboring in the soil. He continued, voice steady, determination emanating from every fiber of his being. "This land is my legacy. It's where I grew up, where I raised my children." Just then the leader, thirsting for dominance, made a sudden move. He reached down and grabbed a handful of dirt, flinging it toward Joe like an act of defiance. Joe stood still, refusing to flinch as the dirt hit him, the earthy grains cascading over his work boots. It was a petty act, yet it ignited a fire within him. He challenged, his resolve hardening like the ground beneath him. "You think throwing dirt can hurt me?" He took another step forward, eyes blazing with determination, making sure they felt the weight of his presence. Joe was not just protecting some crops, he was standing up for an entire way of life. For a moment the boys were stunned into silence. They had expected laughter and intimidation. They hadn't anticipated being met with such unwavering strength. The air hung heavy, tension crackling, while Joe stood tall, his hands steady at his sides. "Let's get out of here," one of the bystanders muttered, glancing nervously at the leader, but the bravado was still clinging to their leader. "We aren't finished here," he shot back, but his voice lacked conviction. Joe took a deep breath, choosing his next words carefully. "You want to prove you're tough, respect this land, learn what it means to work for what you have." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across the boys' faces. They exchanged nervous glances, realizing the man standing before them wasn't just an old farmer. He was a warrior, and this land was his battlefield. The tension hung thick in the air, and the looming question was whether they would retreat or escalate. "We'll just see you around," the leader finally muttered, a hint of defeat creeping into his drawl. They stumbled back toward the truck, uncertainty etched on their faces. As the tires churned dust into the twilight sky, Joe watched them leave, relieved that it hadn't turned into violence. He felt that rush of emotion, a blend of triumph and fear course through him. He had stood his ground, but could he make them understand? Could he turn this around into something more than just confrontation? Days passed, and the encounter lingered in Joe's thoughts. They had seemed like mere kids, but deep down, he sensed they were searching for more a purpose or perhaps an understanding of their own identities. One afternoon, as he was tending to the fields, he saw the truck approach again. His heart raced. Was it trouble returning for round two? As the vehicle came to a halt, he felt a swirl of anxiety mixed with resolve. The boys climbed out, but this time there was no laughter, no bravado. They stood awkwardly by the fence, glancing at each other before the leader finally spoke up, voice quieter. "We." Surprise jolted through Joe, and he took a step closer. "Apologize." He wasn't ready to let his guard down completely. "For acting like fools," the leader admitted, looking down. "We didn't realize you put so much into this place." Joe crossed his arms, studying them closely. "I appreciate your honesty, but words are just words." The boys exchanged worrisome glances, but then the leader stepped forward, determination ignited in his eyes. "Can we help? We want to learn to work." It struck Joe as a moment of redemption, not just for him but perhaps for them too. This could be the start of something meaningful. "All right then," he said finally, feeling the tension ease just a bit. "Show up tomorrow morning at sunrise." The boys nodded, their eyes brightening. They promised before climbing back into the truck, the air now tinged with a sense of hope rather than animosity. The next morning when the sun rose, Joe was already hard at work in the barn. He heard the familiar sound of tires crunching on gravel and looked up to see the boys arriving, visibly eager, almost bouncing with excitement. "All right, boys, we're going to start with something simple, fixing this old fence. The cattle need to stay contained, and with your help it'll go quicker," Joe explained, handing out tools. Their initial enthusiasm turned into hard work as they dug into the task. Joe guided them in every aspect, sharing knowledge about fencing and the importance of each post. At first their hands were awkward with tools, but as hours passed they transformed. One of the boys asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's not always glamorous, that's for sure, but it's honest work," Joe replied, feeling a wash of satisfaction as the boys began to find their rhythm. The sun beat down, but laughter soon filled the air, rapidly replacing the animosity from their first encounter. Over the course of that day, as they worked side by side, something remarkable began to happen. The walls built by their earlier actions crumbled, revealing instead a foundation of understanding. Hours turned into days, and soon they were returning regularly, eager to learn more. Joe taught them how to plant seeds, the importance of crop rotation, and even how to drive the tractor. With every task, they grew more confident, and the neighborhood kids who once laughed at him now respected him. One evening, as they gathered around the barn after finishing a long day of work, the leader looked over at Joe and said, "Thanks for giving us a chance. We didn't realize how much goes into making a farm work." Joe nodded, pride swelling within him. Life is about respect, learning about it, growing from it, and treating others how you want to be treated. As summer turned to fall, the harvest season approached. The boys showed up every day, eager to help bring in the crops. The laughter that once filled the air with mockery now became a chorus of shared triumph. Joe declared one evening as they gathered under the setting sun, a basket of fresh snacks spread out before them. As they shared stories, each boy spoke about how this experience was impacting them. "I realized I can be better," one of them said, his voice filled with newfound conviction. Joe raised his glass high, laughter ringing out. "To hard work, friendship, and lessons learned." As the sun set behind them, painting the skies with vibrant hues, Joe looked around at the boys. What had begun as an encounter filled with hostility had blossomed into something extraordinary. They had planted more than just seeds this year. They had cultivated respect and understanding, not just for the land but for each other. In the end, the farm stood as a symbol of resilience, a place where bridges were built, not broken, and where the true essence of strength was in defending what you believe in. Each challenge faced, every line drawn in the sand turned into fertile ground for growth. And united under the vast expanse of the sky, each of them realized that respect is the farm's most treasured crop. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays over the expansive fields of corn that danced in the gentle breeze. Farmer Hank Lawson wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him after a long day of work. The crop stood tall and ready for harvest, a testament to the years of labor he had poured into this land. Each stalk represented not just a season of hard work, but a promise, a legacy handed down through generations. But just as he stepped back to admire the fruits of his labor, he heard the unmistakable growl of an engine approaching. A truck bounced along the dirt road that cut through his property, tires kicking up dust like a swirling storm, interrupting the serenity of the evening. Hank's heart sank. He recognized that truck. It belonged to a group of local teenagers notorious for their reckless behavior. As the vehicle skidded to a stop, the doors swung open, releasing a cacophony of laughter that echoed through the stillness. 3 young men tumbled out, swaggering with the overconfidence only youth can possess. They were up to no good, and Hank could feel it in his bones. The tallest one yelled, a smirk plastered on his face. "What are you doing out here?" The others roared with laughter, their bravado filling the air, a mockery of everything Hank had spent his life building. Hank felt the familiar knot of tension twist in his stomach. He had seen this before, young people oblivious to the hard work and dedication that went into tending this land. He stepped forward, grounding himself in the weight of his conviction. This is private property. The leader took a step closer, gauging Hank's reaction. Or what? You'll call the cops. The challenge hung heavy, and the laughter morphed into something more menacing. Hank's grip tightened around the pitchfork he carried. He knew he had to stand his ground. He asked, his voice calm although a storm brewed beneath the surface. "This land isn't just dirt, it's my life." One of the other boys jeered, stepping forward with a rock in hand, ready to throw it. In that moment, Hank locked eyes with the boy, feeling the fire of his ancestors push him to stand firm. "Go ahead, throw it," Hank challenged, a resolute calm settling over him. Boy hesitated, arm raised, and in that fleeting moment Hank sensed the shift. Fear was creeping into the bravado, uncertainty weaving through their tight-knit group. Hank stepped forward again, using the weight of his words as a shield. "You think this is a game? What if I told you I've survived storms that could swallow your entire town?" The laughter finally died, replaced by a thick silence that hung heavy in the air. Hank drew closer, his heart pounding yet resolute. He had faced tougher battles than this. "Respect is earned, not demanded. You come here to wreck what I've built. You redecorate my life with scattered stones and broken dreams." The leader's bravado faltered, and in that moment Hank could see something flicker behind his eyes, a sign of realization, perhaps even fear. The other boys shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, weighing their options. "Maybe we should just leave," one said, breaking the tension. The leader snapped, trying to regain control. But the doubt continued to creep in, eroding the bravado bit by bit. Hank stood his ground, waiting to see what would happen next. With a growl, the leader threw his rock to the ground, his bravado cracking under pressure. "Fine, let's go." The sound of their retreat was louder than their laughter had ever been, a testament to Hank's unyielding spirit. As the truck roared away, dust swirling behind it, he felt a flood of relief, mingled with satisfaction. He had stood his ground, but deep inside him, a seed of doubt still lingered. Would they come back? Would it escalate next time? That night Hank lay in bed, tossing and turning, replaying the confrontation over and over in his mind. He had faced many storms, but the thought of young aggression returning nagged at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Days passed, and Hank went about his usual routine, but the tension still hung in the air. Rumors swirled through the town, and Hank could feel the whispers weighing down on him like a rain cloud. The boys had gone back to their friends, but the story of their encounter had transformed from a simple act of rebellion into a rallying cry, a challenge to their ego that now echoed through their tight-knit community. Finally, The day arrived when he saw them again. It was late afternoon, and he was tending to the fence line when he spotted the truck approach once more. This time there were more of them, 4, maybe 5 young men, all fresh-faced and eager for trouble. Hank's heart raced. It was time to confront the storm head-on. He straightened himself and took a deep breath, grounding himself once more in his resolve. He watched as they climbed out of the truck, heart pounding as dread settled on him like an unwanted cloak. "Look who it is." "The mighty farmer trying to protect his little patch of dirt," the leader sneered, strutting toward him again. "Enough," Hank replied, voice steady, yet carrying a force that belied his calm demeanor. "Why are you back here? Didn't get the message last time." "Respect," one of the other boys shouted. Hank took a step forward, fueled by years of hard work and conviction. "No, I don't think I'm a king, but I stand for what I believe in. You have a choice to make. You can either walk away or learn from your mistakes." "What are you gonna do, old man? Call the cops?" The taunt was laced with disrespect. The group surrounded him, trying to intimidate him, but Hank felt resolute. "I'm not afraid of the law, and I'm not afraid of you," he replied, steady. "You want to talk about power?" the leader shouted, eyes glinting with reckless abandon. Before Hank could respond, one of the boys surged forward, aiming a kick at a nearby fence post, splintering the wood and sending it crashing down. The sound echoed, a stark reminder of their strength but also of their naivete. Hank bellowed, but the damage was done. That splintering wood was more than just a fence, it was a declaration of war, a clear sign that these boys were testing not just his patience, but his resolve. In that moment, a decision crystallized within him. "If you want to fight, then you're going to learn what fighting truly means," he declared, eyes blazing with an intensity they had never seen before. One of them asked, bewildered by Hank's sudden transformation, "I'm going to teach you how hard this land is to work, how every inch matters." Hank picked up his pitchfork, pointing it towards them with fierce determination. "You want to challenge me? Fine." Expectations shifted, a tangible silence settling between them. They hadn't expected this reply, they expected anger, aggression. Instead, Hank had turned the intimidation back on them. "Let's see then," the leader said, pulling back slightly. "Tomorrow morning you meet me here at dawn. We'll spend a day planting, tilling, understanding. If you succeed, you can do whatever you want around here." The leader pressed, curiosity edging onto his face. "You leave me and my land alone. You learn respect one way or another," Hank said, resolve in every word. The boys exchanged glances, weighing the proposition, but there was a glimmer of uncertainty in their eyes. The bravado began to seep away, and Hank felt for the first time that he had a real chance to turn this around. "All right," the leader finally said, a hint of resignation in his voice. The following morning, the air was crisp as the sun began to rise. Hank stood in his fields, a sense of anticipation mingling with anxiety. The boys arrived, their faces schooled into serious expressions, but he could see the nervous excitement bubbling beneath the surface. "Let's get to work," Hank said, acknowledging them with a nod. They gathered tools, and as Hank explained how to prepare the soil for planting, he could feel their impatience. It wasn't glamorous work, digging, tilling, getting their hands dirty, but he also saw the initial flickers of realization spark in their eyes. Hours passed, and as sweat dripped down their brows, Hank made sure to guide them through the process. Each seed they planted was a lesson wrapped in the soil. "This is how you grow," he explained, "with patience and effort." By midday, the tension in the air had begun to shift. The boys were tired and understanding was dawning. They had come thinking they could intimidate, yet here they were, digging and planting alongside a man whose life had become the very essence of hard work. But just as Hank felt the ground begin to shift beneath them, a distant sound reached his ears, a rumble that shook the atmosphere. He stopped, frowning, looking off toward the horizon. The sky had darkened unexpectedly, a storm brewing ominously. The leader asked, anxiety slipping into his voice. Hank's instincts kicked in, realizing they would have little time to prepare. "That storm could hit us quick." Suddenly, a crack of thunder reverberated across the fields, a warning shot that sent shivers down their spines. The boys exchanged worried glances, now feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on their shoulders. Hank urged, moving with newfound urgency as raindrops began to splatter down around them. The vibrant greens of the field turned darker under the gloom, and the wind whipped through the stalks of corn. But as the sky threatened to unleash its fury, a sudden reality dawned on Hank. He had taken a risk, opening the boys up to the hard truths of farming, and it was now an uphill battle against time and nature. He locked eyes with the leader, who now bore a look of seriousness. He asked, voice steady despite the mounting chaos around them. And as the winds howled and the lightning danced on the horizon, Hank realized this was more than just about the crops. It was a battle for respect, commitment, and understanding. Would they rise to the challenge, or would they retreat in the face of nature's fury? With the storm approaching fast and a day of hard labor still ahead, the tension swelled, leaving only one question. Would they take a stand, or would the storm sweep them away?